a few people short than normal, but I can't really say as I live. This is a kind of a high-level public budgeting session, so try to stay awake. So the first thing I kind of wanted to go over, there's a couple of handouts out on the table and some actual data from Mr. Linden provided that to us, because there seems to be an idea that nobody's doing anything about the homelessness problem. And you can see by the data that's out on the table that we are, and our community partners are addressing some of the issues, obviously not all. But I wanted to provide that to you along with the other handout, the stapled one, that is, basically a breakdown of how people become homeless, and the resources for them, what they are, the intentional, kind of the three categories, right?
Yeah.
Three categories of homelessness. And we talked about that a little bit last time, dividing it up into two categories, but the handout here kind of shows that there's three. And I think that the last meeting we identified the third group is the one that we really wanted to focus on. So there's that for your information. So yeah, let's talk about public budgeting a little bit. Basically, every service or every functional area in the city, other than water, sewer, and stormwater, comes from the city's general fund. And those dollars in the general fund can be used for any good governmental purpose. The way that it's framed. So, with general fund, any good governmental purpose, just going over a few numbers, like I said, this is very high level. And not getting into the weeds too much at all, but our 2022 adopted budget for general fund was a little over $15 million. Now, the expenditures that were adopted were also a little over $15 million. And what's paid out of that is administrative services, so you're talking about human resources, information technology, risk management, so working with our insurer. Then we have the city clerk, Donna, and kind of her group that coordinates all the agendas and everything like that. Then me, the city manager's office, and that also has legal, so the paper our attorney. Parks, facilities, and community development, how we take care of our building. A lot of things haven't been done to this building for 22, 23 years since it was first built, so there's a lot of upkeep that needs to happen. Finance, basically the folks that put all this together and make sure our bills are paid. Fire and emergency services, municipal court, and police. And there's a little bit that goes into public works, but a lot of public works is paid for out of those enterprise funds I was talking about earlier. The general fund dollars that go into public works are subsidies to get our streets painted, and to take care of street issues. And the reason why I go over all of that is because any response that comes out of this committee, any recommendations that come out of this committee, have to come out of that fund. And that is a very limited fund, because when you look at the revenue sources, our two biggest sources of revenue are property taxes and sales and use taxes. Property taxes an issue, and it's an interesting management issue because, interesting, I say that, I'm sure Mark gets a good chuckle out of that too, because we're limited to 1% per year as raise in property tax. We can't go up any more than that. We usually budget a little bit higher than that, but that's for new construction, so we don't see a whole lot. But when you look at the numbers, and I'm sure you've all seen it over the last several months, you have inflation at, I think the last reported number I saw was 9.1%. So you can kind of see how those revenues go up about like that, but our expenses are going up like that. that causes significant issues and significant pressures, and it's called a structural deficit. So, when we talk about the resources that we have this year, and right now we're working on the 2023 budget, the 2024, and all the way out, when we're looking at a 5-year financial forecast or a 10-year financial forecast in about the year, well, actually in the year 2025, we're still the general fund goes into the red. We're not gonna have any more resources. And I say all this with the component of this is that all of our budget projections with employee raises and employee COLAs and everything else that employees expect in this difficult hiring environment and deserve, frankly, in this environment, because they have to pay their own rent, bills, and utilities. That's without adding any new programs or any new people. So we're already going into the red in 2025, unless something changes. And that's what happens in cities in Washington State in particular because of that taxing structure, why you have to grow to survive. If you don't add new opportunities for retail, the only revenue growth we can see in our current revenue streams is additional sales taxes. That's it. So when we're looking at adding new programs, and this is all to inform you when the group gets together 2 meetings from now and comes up with those 5 to 8 recommendations, that you know what you're looking at as far as what we can afford to pay for, or things we could cut. Now there's a trade-off, there's always a trade-off. If you want to do this, we have to stop doing something else. Or there's opportunities for new revenue streams. But nobody likes the taxes raised, I don't, nobody else does that I have ever met. So there's a trade-off that we have to make, or we have to look at new opportunities for revenue. And those are the things that I outlined in the body of the email that I sent out when I sent out the agenda. There's a couple of different ones. And I kind of gave a high-level overview of what each one of those are. You have the affordable housing and related services sales tax. The other thing when looking at the environment kind of around us is in the city of Olympia, their total sales taxes are 10%. But the other thing to keep in mind is the city doesn't get that whole 10%, actually. Ours are 8.8, but we only get 1.3 of that. The rest of that goes to the state. So our sales tax rate is effectively 1.3%, and we're just looking at our revenues. Now there are some shared revenues that come from the state, things like the marijuana tax, the alcohol tax, things like that. And we do grants. We've been incredibly successful over the last several years getting grants from the state to finish off various projects. But I'll just give you one example. The Civic Center parking lot out here that we have had on the gravel and dirt out there that we have had kind of on the agenda to get built for the last 2.5 years. That bid, initially we projected that cost at about $300,000. This is just a big parking lot. $300,000 for that, along with the basketball court and everything else. That bid came back at $602,000. So costs for all of our projects are going up. Western Gateway is no exception. We had to ask City Council just for the parking lot for an additional $125,000 in budget authorities to get that thing built, because it's such a big deal for the community, and it's something we said we're going to do, so we're going to do it. Western Gateway is no different. $2.7 million is what the entire project's going to cost, and it's going to be very nice. We had to do something that we call here in the building value engineering, where you take out every unnecessary thing, the thing that makes the place, makes it look like a complete street, makes it look a valuable asset to the community, and take that out. What do people need? And that's new pavement, so they're not busting roads and popping potholes when they're coming down the road. So that's just to put everything we have in the context of what we're looking at. So when you look at these, I kind of wanted to get thoughts from everybody on each one of these potential revenue sources, and some of them aren't anything that the city actually controls. Some of it is with our partners with the county. And I think that just by being here and attending, it's important for our county partners as well as us. I mean, we have to work together to solve or try to address the problem. So when you're looking at the housing, the affordable housing related services sales tax, again, you would take the 8.8 and it would that's actually a property tax, excuse me. So counties and cities are authorized to oppose additional regular property tax levies up to 50 cents per thousand. That would make folks' property taxes go up. When we do that, we could use those monies for very little income households or to finance new affordable housing projects for the city if we didn't have a private sector partner. So on that one, what are there any general thoughts about what that might look like? How would people in this room and generally people in the community feel about a raise in property taxes? Or should we talk about it the other direction and just say, we're not gonna raise taxes, we need to do it with what we have now, and what programs would be a suggested cut?
I'm one of the people you might not meet ever again. I'm okay with taxes being raised, especially because I do have representation. So taxation without representation, no. But I feel like I'm part of the community, and I feel like I need to give back to the community. And I feel that whatever we need to make the community thrive is okay with me, as long as it's not, the type of tax that discourages business instead of is part of the business. So I think I can afford to create a better community by having a slight tax increase.
What would that, do you know what that number would be?
Excuse me. So 50 cents per thousand, so on a $300,000 house, which if you could even find a $300,000 house, but that's kind of the benchmark that we've always used. It would generate about $600 a year.
So have you run the numbers of what it would generate for the program if we did it?
Total. I haven't. But I can dig more into that if that's something people want to consider.
I think if people have an understanding of exactly what the money is to be used for, if it's very clearly defined, it's measurable, people may support it with taxes. I've seen that in other levies. The fire levy went through, but people know exactly what that goes for. If there's a specific project, sometimes it'll pass, sometimes it won't. It depends on the mood of the tax base.
Yeah. So you got to show people exactly what they're buying. I agree with that. And I misspoke. I'm sorry. For a $300,000 house, it'd be about $150 a year. I should never try to do math. So I agree with it. Based on the facts that I just gave, I guess we can start the conversation there. Based on kind of the budget information I just gave, I'm sure it's relatively similar for the county. Is taxes a new revenue stream, a new tax, something that this committee as a whole would like to take a look at, regardless of which one of these options it is?
I would like to look more of a sales tax, because it's more of a voluntary thing. When you buy a TV or you buy a car, there's no sales tax on food, obviously. So it's more of a voluntary tax if we were to add a sales tax instead of a property tax, which would be, forced on people.
Sure.
I think sales tax is more voluntary to me.
Any other thoughts on which direction we should initially start off with?
And the county chose not to take the 1%, just because times are hard right now. They're gonna get harder. And so I think that as a whole, we need to think about we've got so many issues, but we're gonna see a lot of people suffering in the next 2 to 3 years because of the recession and inflation and so I'd like for all of us to keep that in mind as we move forward. Let's be very cautious about what we do and how it's going to affect the businesses, our residents. It's gonna get tough.
Okay, well, we can go through a couple of these things. The document recording fees I put on there, you know, it's not something that city can do, just because several other counties have done that. I think if I remember right, Pierce County adds $1 charge to every document recording that generates money for their program.
Those are all set by the ledge.
Yeah.
So the legislature sets those fees and some of them come to the county, some of them go back to the state. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like is that there's this recording surcharge for homelessness programs that, budgeted in 2022, we think that we could receive up to $850,000 worth of them. So recorded documents tend to be driven by home sales. It's usually the largest recorded document that's out there. So as you see home sales starting to slow down a little bit, you'll see those revenues also start to slow down. If you look back to 2009-ish, you'd see actually about a 30% decrease in 1 year in recording fees, specifically for that. So when we get programs that are often funded by super cyclical revenue streams, we just need to go into it understanding that let's not budget to spend all of it. Let's keep ourselves a little bit of a reserve to weather through a 2 or 3 year recession and what does that look like. But yeah, I mean, you look at that and treatment sales tax, about $1 million. So those are already funding programs. A lot of the programs that are actually represented within this room are alternative courts are funded through those. So if we want to cut some of those things to redirect this money into another avenue, then we can absolutely discuss that. But I think that if we're talking about new revenue, then you've got to have a legislative body that's willing to increase sales tax or increase property taxes.
Agreed, and that's pretty much like the low-income housing tax credit program. That is pretty much the purview of private side developers. But it's a tool available to us, and if we could recruit a developer to provide the workforce housing or affordable housing component, then they can make use of that program. The HUD Continuum of Care program, I actually don't know a lot about that one. I put that in here because it was identified by the Association of Washington Cities program. That's a federal program, but I will say that when cities and or counties or any local revenue does a federal grant program, the administration of that grant is and all the requirements you have to meet for the federal dollars usually costs just as much as you get, in my experience. So it's not necessarily something that I would want to do as a city on our own, just because we'd have to hire another individual just to administer that program and make sure we get all the check boxes. But it is not illegal. And then the low-income housing tax credit, the mental health and chemical dependency sales tax,
That's the treatment sales tax that I was just talking about. It's about $1 million a year.
So that was available for the county. It generated about $1 million. For us, it generated about 50,000, maybe. Not a significant dollar amount on our own. If there was a partnership available, that would be available to us as well. And then the Washington State Housing Trust Fund, they have, that's basically where every municipal government is going, because it does not require raising taxes, and it does not require necessarily paying services. But the line for that is similar to the line for Seahawks season tickets before Russell, right? So you're gonna be all the way at the bottom of the list if we go after that fund. And there's no guarantee that we will ever rise to the top. So, that's kind of what we're looking at, and I would love thoughts from folks about any of these or any ideas that I haven't put on here about how to fund these new programs. Kind of
Well,
what,
there could be other options too. It doesn't have to come from the government level. You could have a nonprofit. They could have fundraisers and things like that. So there are other options that we could also look at. And I would be willing to take a look and see what we could do on that level too. 'Cause typically, I mean, if you're gonna get the government involved, you're gonna have higher wages for building because of the prevailing wages. Yeah. Yeah. So if we could get a nonprofit group to do something, the cost would be cut drastically. Well, I don't think I know.
Well, I think we heard from our groups that, and this may be what we were kind of talking about, is that the last meeting that we had about this, we heard from groups that had resources that would be willing to donate their services and their time to come in and help. That through a nonprofit, much easier than through a governmental entity.
Just keep government out of the way from it.
Yes.
So, and I don't disagree with that at all. I think that what people are asking us to do, what people are asking the city to do, and to some extent the county to do, is do something. And, we're trying to do that, trying to put all the options on the table so this group has all the information available to them to make those recommendations to council. Now, if it's the nonprofit route, that's one of the reasons why we have that data about what's already happening. But it hasn't made an impact on the things people are seeing every day. So, is there another nonprofit? Is one of the other nonprofits available to do more? I mean, I know that their budgets probably aren't in any better shape than mine is. So what resources do they need, in order to address the issue that is affecting, people now? I guess would be the question on that.
Well, Community Lifeline would like to do a lot more, I can tell you that, and we already have relationships with a lot of these people, but our limitations are, first, our location, because the amount of people that do come to Community Lifeline, whether or not they're staying there, or whether or not they're utilizing our meal program or shower programs, it's disrupting the community. Our neighbors in particular, and they deserve to have, their own quality of life and well-being and all those things too. So we're trying really hard to be able to minimize, the conflict between our community and the people that are using our services. But where we're located currently is a barrier because it is right in downtown, it is right next door to a residential neighborhood, it is next to your businesses and things, So I enjoyed visiting the Serenity House in Palm County because they have their shelter on the outskirts of, it's out of town, and they have a shuttle service that takes them to and from. It cleans up the downtown area, allows for businesses to function a lot smoothly, a lot more smoothly. But we definitely don't have the funding to just pick up and move. I mean, we're in a 100-year-old building. Our plumbing has gone out twice this week. We've spent about $1,500 on plumbing. There's still 2 porta potties outside our building because we didn't have working restrooms over the weekend. So, I mean, it's just not a sustainable long-term location. We are doing a fundraiser at the end of September, September 24th. It's It's a Saturday at Neyland Park from noon to 4:30. I'm sure that's gonna be a lot of fun and it'll generate some funding help, but it's not gonna solve all of our problems.
So if you were to have to evaluate the individuals that are visiting Community Lifeline that are probably causing the most disruption or impact to the local community and businesses, are those the individuals that are actually residing there overnight, or are they individuals that are just there for meal service, or are these individuals that you're actually turning away from all of your services because they're so disruptive that you can't help them?
Right, we don't turn anyone away from our meal services, we feed everybody who comes to the door, and we do have families with young children who are included in those groups too, that rely on Community Lifeline to provide them meals every day. But I would say no, that the people residing at Community Lifeline are not the ones disrupting the community. The people that are, there's a woman staying in the park right now, I'm sure you guys have seen her, she's got a whole collection of things around her. She's been offered shelter numerous times, but we've told her that she cannot bring all that stuff into the shelter with her. She refuses to get rid of her belongings. And we wouldn't make somebody get rid of all of their belongings, but I can't take in, all that stuff into the shelter. So, and then there are people, there's another gentleman I've been working with since I started with Community Lifeline who's familiar, I'm sure, to the community. Oftentimes is yelling profanities at himself and hitting himself and screaming. The neighborhood is very familiar with him. We've been trying to work with him for months, and we've had crisis involved. Just Friday, I was told by the crisis team 3 times that they had made the decision, they were going to detain him, he was going to be admitted into the hospital. They put him in the car, and 2 hours later he's back to the park. So, it's difficult when we can't, Community Lifeline, and so that person actually was the cause of our plumbing issues, so I had to put up a boundary and say, I'm sorry, enough's enough, you're putting holes in our walls, you're destroying our plumbing system, these are, high dollar things that we just can't afford to keep replacing. And so now he's staying in the park, and I don't know what other resources are available. If he can't be detained, I don't know, Community Lifeline can't be responsible, so.
So of all the people that you serve, there's a pretty small number of individuals that are probably negatively impacting the surrounding community.
Yeah, I don't think that the people staying in the shelter are the cause of the disruption. I think that it's people who are not, or maybe they're coming to grab a meal, maybe they're coming to use the shower, maybe they're just congregating in the park. Or we're having to turn people away on a daily basis because we don't have the ability to shelter them. So then they just kind of linger in the area and keep coming back to find out if there is space available. We're working with Melissa and Dave to increase our capacity right now. But it's challenging in the building that we're in because it's as old as it is. And because of the amount of work it takes to keep things working and functioning, I just think that it costs so much more money to sometimes keep this building alive than it would be more cost effective in the long run for sustainability to work together to consider a better location and what that would look like.
I want to go back to what Jeff said about structural deficiency. Like, our amount of homeless people is going to grow like this. And if recession's coming, it's going to get worse, right? And then we're still spending at this level, so we're going to be in a worse position in a few years down. So we need to get aggressive and take a look at all of these and implement all of these and maybe cut back on other services. Maybe we can reimagine what Sergeant Lawson does, and if there are unfilled positions in the PD or the Sheriff's Department, maybe we can have more of an integrated way to connect the social services with that. But I think we need to get super aggressive towards this because it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And if there's a recession, then charitable giving will go down as well. So then we can't do it with just nonprofits. So we're in an emergency situation. We've been ignoring it forever, you know, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And a lot of our community members are rightly so angry about what's going on. But the solution is not to do nothing and to let things go as they are and to maintain that structural imbalance and structural, anyway, that's all I'm gonna say. I think we should go about looking at all of these and then reimagine how we do government as well, because we do have unfilled positions that are in our police department and our sheriff's department that we could maybe go towards social services. And we need to reimagine what we do as a government, as a people. So that's just my 2 cents, and that's why I feel like I have a voice in this council and the city, and that's why I feel like if we have to raise taxes, then so be it. And it should be incumbent upon us who do have houses to make sure that if we have houses, that we enjoy our house as well, you know, and have a good community to live in that house. Or we can live in Pottersville, you know, and everyone's mad at each other, and we're just, you know, increasing the level of animosity toward each other. And that's not the type of city I want to live in, and I want to have a balance between where's the right spot where we can tax at a level where we're not hurting ourselves, at the same time increasing the value, the scale of happiness in the community as well. So, and if we're not connected with how we live and being human, being happy, we're going to have more depression and more reasons to escape and to, you know, shoot up or to do things that are negative to us, to, you know, just spiral down. And I think that we're in that position now, you know, and then we're like, oh, we're going to earn money. Well, you know, we need to tighten our own belts, especially those of us who do have houses.
So given what we're working with it being downtown, and we discussed that transitional housing where we would build an alternative camping site, basically, for people like that lady who wants to sleep in the gazebo because she doesn't want to get rid of her stuff. I mean, if we have a place to take her, right, then do they have to go?
Well, I think
Or are they allowed just to sleep in the park?
So they have to go if there is a space available. However, holding them accountable to do that is the other part of the issue that we've talked about, and that's the unfortunately our jail facility not having the folks that want to work there and not having the beds available. And the city and the county are working together to try to address that problem, but that's also going to cost money, significantly. So you have to have both, right? You have to have the accountability piece and you have to have the compassion piece. Both of those things cost.
I think if we had, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say, I don't think that this is being ignored.
No.
I mean, the county has a Housing Behavioral Health Advisory Board. There's a lot of smart people on that board. There's a lot of money funneled to the county that's given out to the community to try to solve the problems. If there are other ways that money can be used, maybe. There's always business available in those boards and nobody ever applies for them. I just think that it's not being ignored. Maybe things can be done better, but there's a lot of smart people working on these problems. There's a lot of money that's being put out. The Community Lifeline, Crossroads is doing a great job. I think Community Lifeline is doing a great job with the funds that they have, and there's other facilities, Conseco, and many other facilities that are Northwest Resources and that are doing what they can with what they have. But I don't think it's being ignored. And
I think we're doing a great job on the newly homeless. I think we have that down, and I think we do need to be cognizant that, you know, if recession hits, we have enough funding for that. I think really what we're addressing is the chronic, because you can't fix the intentional besides have things. I mean, so I think that's the key, is everything we're talking about are the small number of disruptive folks that are in that chronic and intentional, and how do we address that?
Yeah. And as I mentioned, you know, the city and the county are both working together to find at least a temporary solution to the lack of space in our facility, in a jail. A lot of that has to do with, unfilled positions, because nobody wants them. And that's a problem you see everywhere. I mean, somebody told me about, it doesn't even have to be somebody told me, everywhere you go, it's got out one time. So, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, in the meetings that I'm with all the other counties in the state, everybody, well, except for King and Pierce, they all have, well, I think they do too. They all have issues with hiring people. They don't have the space issues that we do, but they do have the hiring. Nobody really wants to work in a jail. Not too many people want to carry a badge and a 70-pound vest.
Or be an outreach person on homelessness.
Yeah, it's hard.
Where do you want to be?
I mean, Thurston County built this huge new jail and it's half full because they have no staff there. I mean, is it even half full or is it like a
No, I
quarter
think it's
full?
less than that.
Yeah,
I think it's less than that, yeah.
there's not enough staff to actually run the jail. It's this big fancy new jail they built and there's nobody to run it.
Yeah, and staffing's part of it, the age of the facility is another part,
Built in the 80s.
Yeah, built in the 80s. It's younger than me.
Oh, shut up. That was rude.
So it's multifaceted, the issue with the accountability piece, but we have identified a potential solution. I can't guarantee anything that's going to come out of that, but it's something that we have recognized for a long time that is necessary, and we haven't really been able to address it until just recently, because nobody else has any space either. Well, not nobody else. Few places have enough space either. And it doesn't help our police officers who, got into this job to begin with because they wanted to make a difference in the community. And when they can't because of something outside of their control, it doesn't help their morale at all.
It's frustrating.
Yep. Along with all the other things that go along with being a police officer in the state of Michigan.
I was going to ask Athena if she thought Dave has this idea about storage lockers, if that would be something that might help that one lady, if we could lock her stuff up for her.
We had a partnership with Public Health. Christina and I worked on it for lockers we're supposed to be getting. But the lockers, I mean, they're not, you guys have seen all that stuff,
So, my thought was, I've seen this, I have a friend who was working on one of these in Los Angeles, and I think Beeson has seen this in San Diego, where they have a facility lined with basically recycle bins. So you're talking about I think they're 35-gallon, 40-gallon recycle bins that they can use, that you get a ticket, you're able to use that for a week, and it allows them to store their stuff so they don't have to worry about it being stolen. So they can get to appointments and they can get to those things that maybe can get them turned around and back out of homelessness without having to always worry about their stuff going missing.
I think that's a great idea, and I think that it would definitely help as far as, with people worried about losing their things. I think that for Community Lifeline, we run into the dilemma of space once again, because there's not a whole lot of room in that facility where we could put that many.
Right, and my thought is it wouldn't be there, it would have to go to another location, and we'd have to confer with the folks downtown and find a location where it would work, and they still have to, it's not that big a cost to initially set the thing up, but still you have to have a person there that's gonna run the tickets and have, and maybe after 8 o'clock at night, it gets locked up.
Provide security.
Yeah, and it's secure overnight. If you don't get your stuff out, so you get a 1-week use, and if you go in, you can redo it. If you don't, your stuff gets pulled out of the bin, bagged, and put into storage for a certain amount of time. I mean, there's a way to make it work. I'm just thinking about one thing, what can we do immediately just as a mitigation measure to get things rolling that's not super costly. But again, it comes back to who do we have run it.
Well, that sounds like an idea that will make it to the short list for short, intermediate, and longer term recommendations, when we get to that point. I think it can certainly have an impact with, the piles of stuff you see Brewer Park and some of the carts and things like that.
Yeah, if I could keep the shopping cart traffic down, that would be a help.
Okay. So, that's kind of what I had for you today. If there's no other thoughts, I mean, we can keep this meeting relatively short, a lot shorter than our last three.
You know, the other thing is, as we get through this process, and if we have a well thought out, well designed project, you can also go to the legislature. We're coming up into a long session. And if anything's gonna be funded, and especially if you put the word pilot behind it, the legislature tends to look at those pretty favorably in the long sessions. That might be a place to go, at least to get the capital to start something. But we'll still have to have a plan for how to run it, who runs it, how we fund that. But I think, you know, given something that's planned, sexy, uses all the buzzwords, it's just you have to be savvy about how you take things to the legislature to get it funded. Commissioner?
Yeah, so on that note, Mason County again would be setting the pace. You know, here we've got a pilot project and it's sexy. I don't know, I don't think I'd include that word in there, but maybe inappropriate. But I do think that if we brought something to the legislature and it had maybe not all the answers, but a majority of the answers, I bet we can get help.
We're breaking ground on Quixote villages, but the problem is it's a high barrier shelter. If we can get more tiny house villages that have a lower barrier, that might be an attractive solution to move forward. Also, going back to what Eric said last meeting was the mental health part is a huge component, and I think the shelter is a huge component. If we can focus on the mental health part, we would have fewer incidences that are inflammatory. But if you look at Shelton as a whole, I walk downtown every night, and it's kind of nice, especially during Christmas, you know, when Chamber of Commerce and everybody puts up the lights, and I mean, it's beautiful, you know, and you know, if you just compare it to other municipalities, it's way safer and it's way more attractive. And we have something very special here, and it's just that we're starting to look like other cities that haven't done well with a lot of the problems that are upsetting a lot of the business owners and people in the community. But I think we need to start looking at all the positive assets we have here and emphasize those as well as you know, sitting in our own depression of what's going on here and around the world. But you know, like this, I just want to emphasize that I think one thing we could do immediately is try to do with the mental health and increase our levy. So
That's something that's on our legislative agenda for sure, is mental health resources.
Yeah, I think that when you're dealing with the chronically homeless, specifically that group, you're signing up for the mental health piece too. So if you're not prepared to offer the mental health support or the ability to work with people who are dealing with a variety of mental health issues that also fall into that chronically homeless population, you're setting yourself up for failure, which is why, you know, Community Lifeline, we're working diligently with law enforcement, with trying to build partnerships with, I just met with Capital Recovery Center. They want to have a presence here in Mason County and do offer that substance use and mental health support. So, I mean, if we are able to address these things in a collaborative way, then that's where the success is going to come from. It's not just about getting people out of sight, out of mind, off the street. It's about keeping them off the street and keeping them in, you know, their best behavior and not disrupting the community. So that's part of our challenge, and it's a good challenge. We're up for it, but it's definitely part of it.
So what, just announcement for the next meeting, I intend to have,
Greg Road.
Yes, Commissioner Brotherton from Jefferson County, down here to talk about what Jefferson County did with, in partnership with the City of Fort Town, and their 5-year plan that they put together. Seems to be working relatively well, so you can come down here and talk about that. That'll be their next meeting on September 20th, so there'll be a little bit bigger break between this meeting and the next one than we have had recently. And then start talking about solutions, start talking about those recommendations like lockers, like presenting something to the legislature for whatever this group comes up with, whether it's directed the resources for. Keeping in mind that we have to be able to pay to run it for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So it's got to be a component of our budget. And then on October 11th, we're really going to sit down and I want to come up with between 5 and 8 concrete actionable steps, maybe 2 in each category, short, intermediate, and long, that we can then present to the City Council. That evening, on October 11th, will be the city's spotlight shelter event. And I would appreciate it if most of you could attend that event. So when the public comes in, and it's going to be focused on the homelessness issue. So when the public comes in and asks questions about what we're doing, maybe you can help answer some of those questions. Or at least say, this is what we're doing to work on it. Something like that. But I think that would be great for the wider community to see that all of these different diverse perspectives have come together to try to find solutions that are going to work.
Can you send us a reminder?
Yes, I will. So we'll have that, and then what I will do following that is we'll take those recommendations, let's just say there's 6 of them, and I'll find out what it's going to cost to implement it immediately, and then what it's going to cost to support it for the next 20, 25 years. And then I'll present those to council and make sure we coordinate with the county about that. So.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that tomorrow there is a housing meeting, a behavioral advisory board meeting at 11 a.m. They are open to the public, and some of the agenda items are discussion on risk at homeless, a request for qualification budget for consolidated homeless grant, eviction prevention, citizen openings. There are some openings to be on the board, and we're going to talk about the rest of the schedule. But I can forward the Zoom link to whoever wants it, or Dave probably could, I don't know. But, I mean, there's citizen openings, and if anybody wants to be involved in how the money is spent, this is a great board to be on. So.
Okay.
Nice plan.
Thanks, everybody. See you on September 20th.